Hello and welcome to another one of my videos, and in this video I'm actually going to go over shock towers for my Hyper 7. Now as you can see, I haven't actually got the one on my Hyper 7 at the moment. I've taken it off, and there's a very good reason for that, and that's because I'm going to replace it. Now I've never actually taken these off the cars, I've never had to in the past, and basically the stock ones, if you're doing any type of bashing or anything, they're renowned for breaking, and I thought it was a time, because I'm upgrading everything else, I should actually upgrade the shock towers, and I'm going to go through some of the options which you can do. Now, there's one of the options is in this box right here, and another option is over in the corner. So, we shall go through each of the options and go through the good things and the bad things for each option, and some of the other modifications you can do to actually make your shock towers a bit more robust. So, we shall go straight into it. So, when it comes to Hyper 7 shock towers, what options do you actually have open to you? Because they're a major part of the car, they're taking a lot of force, because it's where the suspension is mounted to, and they can change how your car basically handles and also can take a battering. So, the first option which you can do is just basically go for the bog standard Hyper 7 shock tower. If you're just doing everyday bashing, this shock tower is more than enough. It's 3mm thick stamped aluminium plate. We have 5 mounting holes in each shock tower for the suspension, which is normally more than ample enough for any hobbyist. And we've also got 4 mounting holes for the shock tower to actually mount on. And this mounts on using basically 4 self-tapping wood screws basically into the plastic. Like I say, good if you're doing everyday riding around and hobbyist bashing, but if you want to go over very high jumps and things, these have got a tendency, because all the force is going through these 4 screw holes, to snap these mounts off the diff casing, which yet again means you have to buy a diff casing, because once they're gone you can't mount it. Another problem these have is they've got a tendency to bend the top of the actual towers. Now the reason for this is the front towers in a buggy is where, when you flip it over, it's going to contact the ground, one of the 4 places, and if you hit a stone when it's sliding across on its roof, these bend easily. I've bent these out a few times and they're still a tiny bit bent. Can't help it, but yet again, what are you going to do? Some people double these up, so option 2 is to get a second stock Hyper 7 shock tower, double it up, basically makes these stronger, but you still then have the problem of these mounts here being weak, and if you go over a big jump, land it, either wonkly or anything, you've got the chance of snapping off these shock towers. Well, it's not shock towers, the shock tower mounts on the differential casing. Now, the more observant of yous who have Hyper 7s have noticed that there's 2 extra holes in the actual differential casing underneath the differential close hole, so basically the 2 screws that hold the differential casing together. Now, on the Hyper Pro, we can see that these holes are actually used. Now, we can see here, and if I mount it on the car, I'll stick it on that way. Ooh, just to actually see it a bit better. Ooh. We can see it actually wraps around the differential mounting holes and actually accesses these 2 extra holes on the bottom of the diff casing. And what this does is, instead of the force all going through these 4 screws here, it is evenly distributed through those 4 screws and into these 2 screws here, and because it wraps around tightly to this shape here, it also helps distribute the force through the differential casing instead of through the screws themselves. So this basically helps stop these 2 mounts on the top from breaking off. It's just a good idea, and because we actually have these extra mounting holes and they're more secure, it stops any movement in the shock tower. Well, lessens the movement in the shock tower, because this one just mounted here could actually flex backwards and forwards slightly. This basically reduces it. So, another up to these shock towers is it's very light. We have a lot more mounting holes because it's for a race setup, and a racer who basically races buggies, the smallest little adjustment can make a big difference in a race, and anybody who does racing in normal cars or these cars will tell that's the case. We still have the two normal mounting holes for the E-arms at the top. These are actually machined out of a block of material, so a block of aluminium, to this shape. Now that's always going to be stronger than stamping a part out, just because the molecular structure of the metal is different, the way the grains interact with each other, but I'm not getting into that, it's a boring topic. The only problem with this tower is we still have the tendency over big jumps, or if you turn it over on its roof and hit a rock, of the shock tower shearing across this weak point here where the aluminium's actually machined. This is 2mm thick, that's 3, and the thickest parts on this are 5, but it's still weak. These are basically made for lightness because it's a race Hyper 7 shock tower. So I didn't really want to go for these either, because I wasn't going to use all the mounting positions on the shock towers. I normally just get it to a position I like and keep it there. So it's basically a waste of time. The only things I wanted were these two bottom mounting holes and maybe a stronger shock tower. That was option 4. Option 5, however, after looking over some forms, came to light. And these things are like hen's teeth. This is a Hyper ST Pro shock tower. Now, because the Hyper ST is based on the Hyper 7, most of the parts are actually interchangeable. And this fits on here like a glove. It's made for the Hyper 7. Basically, we have the same bottom mounts here as the Pro tower, but the actual thickness is 10mm thick at its most. It's actually 5mm thick at its next step down, and 3mm thick for the bottom mount, so that means you don't have to change the length of the screws, it's the same thickness. It's just, basically, a lot of people have tried this setup up and these never break. They haven't, I haven't seen one break yet. Downsides, if you can call them that, there's less mounting holes, but like I say, I normally pick one and I stick with it, so there's more than enough there. I'll find out of these 3 mounting holes, I'll be fine. The rear one has 4. What else? The body has to be cut because we've got this brace in between the two towers, but to be honest, it looks quite good as it is. So I can also get a front mount here for it, which goes in, which is off the Hyper ST, but I haven't found one yet, but I never know, I might come across one. But this is what I'm going with. It's thick, it's heavy duty, it's a bit heavier, but it don't matter because I'm not going to be racing it that much. But I don't think I'm going to have a problem of the shock tower breaking or the actual mounts here breaking off. So this is what I'm going to go for. I'm going to quickly mount the front and rear ones on the car, and then I'll get back to you and show you how it looks. So here we are at the end. As you can see, I've got both front and rear Hyper ST Pro shock towers mounted, and they just look the dogs. And I still can't get over how thick these are. No matter what I throw at these, I don't think I'm ever even going to scrape them. They're built like a tank basically, and it just gives the Hyper 7 a totally different look. The only modification I had to do was to the shell. Literally, it was just cut the nose off and take a slither off the back, and no other modifications needed. They're a direct fit. And I can't wait to test it out. It's just a shame at this moment in time it's raining outside, and on Sundays I normally go out with my car, and it doesn't look like this Sunday I'm going to get out, so I am a bit disappointed. Along with the shock towers, I've also installed some Hyper Pro drive shafts. I've got both the centre ones in, I've got both the rear ones in. I can't actually, the front doesn't accept these ones for some reason. I don't know if it's because the turn knuckles are still stock items and not actually ST Pro, because I know the rear Hyper 8 ST aluminium mounts for the uprights, when I had the dog bones in, I could only use one adjustment hole on them. It just wouldn't give me any positive camber. It was always negative, which I didn't like. When I've installed these, I've actually got them onto their maximum camber hole, so it seems like the ST Pro drive shafts are just slightly smaller, but I guess with dog bones, because you've got movement both ends, because they're not fitted both ends, there's a bit of a clearance fit. With the actual Hyper Pro drive shafts, there's actually one fixed universal joint at one end, so that means I'm guessing you can get more play on the other, so you can adjust it more, but that's just a theory. Hopefully the sun will come out and it'll dry up today and I'll be able to get it out, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get it out to the BMX track that I wanted because it'll be waterlogged. So the least I'm going to do, if I can, is take it out to my local industrial estate and go on to the abandoned road that's up there. So yeah, anyway, but I'm happy with the results of the shock towers. Can't wait to try these out, and as always, keep safe and I will see you